against Coca-Cola, because they are, obviously they have the money to dig the deepest bore wells, and they are pumping out the water to make bottled water, and all the farmers nearby their farms are drying up because Coca-Cola is managing to pump out all the water. And just like cities will not enhance public transport so that people don't need to have cars, they don't clean the water system so that you can get clean water in your tap to drink, so that everyone has to buy water in plastic bottles. I remember a few years ago there was a World Water Conference in The Hague, and I had just written this big piece on dams, and they'd asked me to come, but I didn't go initially. Then I read that the Indian government was sending a whole delegation there to justify and to ask for funds for building more dams. So I just kind of arrived there to wreck the proceedings as much as I could. And I was put on this panel, which was supposed to be a panel of writers, but I was the only writer. The others were also writers of policies and things. And in the lobby of that meeting, there were all these, people who were dressed up as faucets, like inflatable faucets. And it was really funny. And the whole meeting was about the privatization of water, to sort of push for the privatization of water. And each of us had to introduce ourselves and say why we write about water. So there was an American man next to me. I don't remember his name, and I don't exactly remember what company he was working for, but whatever. He said, my name is Robert and I work for something, and I write about water because I'm paid to. And then he said, and I just want to say that God gave us the rivers, but he didn't put in the delivery systems. And for this we need private enterprise. So I was up next and I said, I'm Arundhati Roy and I write about water because I'd be paid a great deal not to. It was such a display of wanting to own, just wanting to own everything, just everything, and sell it and then resell it to us. And fundamentally, I think to own language, or maybe that's me and my primary emergency concern as a writer, but I feel that this is something we really need to pay attention to, because I remember at that meeting saying, I've never been in a room full of dead people for a long time, because as a writer you spend your entire life and everything you have trying to minimize the distance between language and thought. You try to describe exactly what you're thinking or exactly what you're saying. And here you are in a room full of people who are doing exactly the opposite. They are devising a language with which to mask thought, and to use words to mean the opposite of what they mean. And to even retrieve our language is a battle.
And I want to go at this from a slightly different direction, which I think one of the most important things that anybody said today is something Lier said, and if anybody's going to write down one thing, this should be it, which is the task of an activist is not to navigate systems of oppressive authority with as much personal integrity as possible. The task of an activist is to take down those systems of oppressive authority. I remember years ago, I was talking to an indigenous friend of mine, Jeanette Armstrong. She's an Okanagan activist and writer. And I was saying, oh my God, I feel so bad because I drive a car and so global warming is all my fault. And she said, take responsibility for what you do but you didn't create car culture. And your job is not to minimize your own personal actions within it, but instead your job is to take down car culture. And another way to put all this is I wrote an essay a few years ago called that got titled by the magazine "Forget Shorter Showers." And in there I talk about how, we always hear the world's running out of water, got to conserve water, got to take shorter showers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that does is displace responsibility on the persons instead of the whole system. And just the numbers are that more than 90% of water is used by agriculture and industry. And so if you take a shorter shower, that's fine. All it's going to do, though, is ruin your social life. Municipal golf courses use the same amount of water as municipal human beings. And so that's where the real action goes. And it's the same thing with trash. And I mean, I'm not saying that one should go ahead and attempt to minimize consumption however one can, but once again, that's not where the real action is. That if I reduce my consumption, if I reduce my trash production, the average person in the United States produces about 2,600 pounds of trash a year, somewhere in there. And so let's say I reduce that to zero. I don't buy anything with any packaging whatsoever. I wear my tennis shoes until they fall off my feet, and I repair my toaster, etc., etc., etc. That's great. But the problem is that the average per capita production of trash in the United States is about 26 tons. And 97% of that is by agriculture and industry again. So we can reduce our personal consumption to zero, and that's not what the real action is. Also, one more thing about that, which this just pisses me off about so many movies we see about environmental stuff. An inconvenient truth. There's this, they lay out all the problems, and at the very end, all the solutions are personal. They don't talk about the larger issues. Or food things. It pissed me off because the whole movie is really great about how the agricultural system is concentrated, it's unsustainable, it's exploitative, and then the solutions. One of the solutions is to buy yogurt from Walmart. It's like, so there's this disconnect at the end. So I think that there is altogether too much concern about personal purity within the environmental movement and the social life.
You should try living as an activist in the land of Gandhi, where unless you wear a loincloth and don't have sex and eat goat cheese, you're a bad person. It's true that whole idea of you have to be a saint first and then be political is also a way of making sure that a lot of people are not political. Yeah?
I was meeting with this group one time. It's the Audubon Expedition Institute. It's a bus that goes around the country with graduate students. And we're all having a conversation one day about whatever it is we're having a conversation. And this one person all of a sudden said, I feel really bad because I'm an activist and all this stuff, but I really like hockey. And so we went around the group and we did this sort of fun little exercise that we called Impure, which is each person said like something they like to do. And you couldn't go, oh, I'm so sorry I do this. Instead, it's like, you know what? I really like potato chips. And this one guy is great. I love this story. This guy's this long-time activist. He's been this great anti-corporate activist. Wonderful work. He's been doing wonderful work since before I was an activist. And his impure thing was he loves eating at fast food restaurants. He like hates the big corporations, but he likes eating at Burger King. Oh well.
no way to connect with that particular part of the organization. And I just say thank you so much for all of you.
I don't think you should answer that question publicly. You should go and tell her.
So the question is about the above ground and underground thing, and the idea being if there's a firewall between the above ground and the underground, then how do people who are underground get the basic support they need, whether it be safe houses or money and that sort of thing. And this is explained in the book Deep Green Resistance, but the basic idea is that there are very specific rules for crossing the firewall. So you can send information both ways, you can send things both ways. But it's tightly controlled. So a person who's underground would know, how to find support or a safe house from someone who's above ground, maybe. But that person on the above ground doesn't know where to find the people underground, what their actual names are. So that the information is very tightly controlled in a way that continues to protect the information or protect the safety and identity of people underground. And then, so it's the same when it goes the other way, like when an underground group sends a communique or something like that to a press office, like the ELF press office, then all of their identifying information is stripped away. So it's sent anonymously and it's sent carefully. So that's how that works in general.
I just want to say also one thing about that, which is there's also models for this that already exist. And I mean, hello, we're in Northern California.
Well, I think first of all, you must tell the people that are doing that. I hope they know what an inspiration it is for the rest of the world. To know that it's happening in America, because and I'm sure that it's the other way around too, because it's extremely important for the information to go both ways. But I would say that it's unlikely that the state will tolerate the occupation of territory for very long. Beyond a point, if it really feels threatened, it will not tolerate that. So you have to have, I imagine, I'm just thinking aloud here, but I imagine some kind of a system that allows you to disperse and regroup. in ways where they don't know where you're going to be next, or how, or when, you know. But basically, it has to turn into a sort of guerrilla occupation where you don't hold territory, because you can't hold territory against the most powerful nation in the world, you know, unless you're in the forest or something like the Maoists, where the people don't know how to go in. But for the state to jack up its levels of violence is just a matter of time. You know, the minute it starts feeling threatened, that is going to happen. But so the politics will have to evolve to a different space, rather than just holding territory, you know. Yeah.
My question, I recently devoured the history of this book, and the biggest qualm I had coming out of that is not the real challenge, it's not an argument against the DDR manual, but it's a question I had that I really recently addressed in the book. All the other resistance movements that were cited in the book, the people who are doing the resisting are directly materially sort of in deprivation because of the system that they're fighting. But in this case, we propose people who would be implementing the resistance or ecological warfare are dependent on that system, not just for comfort, but for their actual survival. So how can that, if that is that decisive ecological warfare avenue, and it starts to work, and you start to get that system, how can you possibly be escalating resistance when resistance is depending on transportation and communication networks, and when people will be struggling to feed themselves, even with the wonderful permaculture network of said that a person will have to live off her land base completely, that they will starve. So, even in the best case scenario, that's something that we have to deal with. I'm just wondering how you foresee resistance
do you have a two-sentence version of that I can give back to the...
how can resistance keep going when it's dependent on systems, the very systems that are burning down, to organize and to feed itself?
How can the resistance continue when it is dependent upon the very systems that it's bringing down in order to feed itself and to communicate and to transportate? And I think Eric addressed that some in terms of only 2% of the oil is used in the United States for agriculture. I mean, look at World War II with the conversion of the United States to a war economy and the UK and victory gardens and all that stuff, where there's a lot of stuff that can be done before it actually becomes the global elite starving as opposed to the poor who are already starving. That's part of it. Another part is, I think, frankly, if the global economic and transportation system is interdicted enough that the resistors can no longer communicate over distance and can no longer